Hi, everyone. You know, Ron's a hard act to follow, and I'm absolutely amazed that we have the entire audience here. It's not been my experience in India. After lunch, everyone disappears. So I know you guys haven't heard enough, so I'm going to speak a lot so that you guys really get bored to tears. Uh, before I start, what's the purpose of customer services? Let's differentiate customer services into two. One is a physical delivery of a service. Someone comes and repairs my air conditioner. Someone comes and repairs my car. Versus the kind of services we've been talking about today. So let's talk about the kinds of services we've been talking about today. What is the purpose of customer services? Come on, guys. Responsiveness. Purpose. Superior experience.
Something that you remember that you have interacted with.
Purpose. No.
You kind of better your brand and create
Your
a
brand. Anyone else? Feel of caring. Feel of caring.
feel of caring.
Anyone else? Repeat business. Okay. My take on customer services is that it shouldn't exist. You need customer services because you're doing something wrong. The purpose of a customer services department is to self-extinguish. And if you can't distinguish, that means you aren't doing a good job. Have you ever thought of that? You all think it's essential. It's essential because something went wrong. So really what you need is a chief customer officer in your company to help you build the culture that will prevent the need for customer services. Does that make sense? Or am I being too radical? Who doesn't agree with me? You all agree. You're trying to be nice to me or you're just too tired? Extinguish the marketing department. Yeah. Okay. The other thing that I worry about, can I just have that? Is that at the end of everything, we want to reduce things to numbers. What if I didn't talk about customer services? What if I talked about things that made you laugh? You'd give me a rating of 5, right? And then 2 weeks later, your boss would ask you, what did you do when you were there? What did you learn from that guy? So nothing. He just told us some jokes. Did I add anything to what you came for? Did I really add anything to what you came for? Yes or no? So all these things you have to take with a grain of salt. I just want to make one more comment before I go into the session where you guys have to participate. And that is, everyone, young lady, you talked about best practices. I don't like to hear about best practices. Because best practices means that you're following someone. I want people to work with me who will have next practices, so that others will follow us. Best is trying to catch up with someone. We want to go beyond that. We want to be the leaders, not the followers. So please, no more best practices. Am I too radical? Okay. So, I know we're running behind time, so I'm not going to really talk too much. Just a bunch of customers that we work with around the world. Very few Indian customers, but telephone companies and insurance companies and power companies and Disney and 3M and Kraft and Mercedes and Philips and you name it, and we work with them. And the reason why we're able to do this is because we add value to them. And my purpose here today is to get you into a discussion on how we can add value to customers, not just satisfy them. So we were talking about people leaving companies. I did some work for the Indian Army. Why do people not join the Indian Army? 20 years ago, they had fewer choices. Today, they have many more choices. So what do you need to do to add value to these people so that they would want to join the army? That's what you really need to figure out, rather than to say, well, it's too bad these people are going to leave. What is it that we can do that will make them come back to us? So this is what we want to discuss today. So the first question is, who does the customer belong to? How many of you believe that the customer belongs to the customer service department? Come. How many of you believe that the customer belongs to someone else? No? Come on, guys. Whom does the customer belong to? Yeah, that's which person does the customer belong to? Come up. You're from yeah. The guys whose share prices are going up. Come on, I need someone else who believes. Come on, why don't you come? Whom does he belong to? Marketing? Come up. No, wait. Whom does he belong? You want to get that?
Well, I believe the customer belongs to himself first, and not necessarily. Yeah. You heard my marriage example in the morning. But the customer belongs to every piece of the environment that the organization operates in.
And why do you believe he belongs to customer services?
The moment we say he belongs to company, a very generic thing, we have an unique setup to take care of the customer, to address the customer issues. So he belongs to them, that set of people. Anything goes wrong, their responsibility is assigned. Otherwise, it is no one's baby.
You're saying it's everyone's baby.
Well, interestingly, it is everyone's baby because the customer operates in the environment right from the brand experience to the buying decision to the point of sale to the point of onboarding to his life cycle to his exit. So honestly speaking, he belongs to everybody within the organization and not necessarily customer service alone. And that's what I actually liked about the two things that you said, next practice and self-extinguishing.
So if do you believe that if there is a customer service department, the rest of the people in the company are of the view that the customer is taken care of?
Like I said in the morning, most companies believe, even today, that customer service has been set up to take care of the faults in product design and sales practices. So, to be honest with you, customer service, the best customer service provider is one where the customer never needs to really transact with them face to face or through any other physical channel.
So, did you guys ever think about MTNL when all the other telephone companies were providing a lot of services? You never really had to complain to them because they weren't offering anything other than just pure.
Well, I mean, a lot of people in their 20s don't know about MTNL, but I believe that the full form of MTNL at some point in time was "Mera telephone nahi lagta hai." So
So you think?
I once again, I stand by my point. I can put it this way, though there are different ministries, why Prime Minister is required? To lead those many ministries? If something goes wrong, at least the ultimate person, he can be reached. So if a customer service centric setup is there, so it belongs to them. They have the responsibility, and not only the responsibility, the customer is more satisfied. He can approach one point and get all the solutions.
So how many agree with him and how many agree with him? Those who agree with him, put your hand up. Come on. How many agree with him? Hey. Wait a minute. And how many agree with him? Mix of both. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So who does the customer belong to? You, him, or her? And who is this you? This is what we've been really talking about. So the real answer is that the customer belongs to the entire company. And he's right. There needs to be a point of contact, which in many cases doesn't exist. Have you gone to many websites and tried to figure out how to, insurance websites, how to contact a person other than the call center? There's no way. So who is that point of contact? Because you don't even know how to get to him. Okay, I'm going to go very fast for the simple reason that we're running out of time. So the next one is customer strategy and business strategy. How many of you do a customer strategy? 1, 2, 3. And how extensive is your customer strategy? Is it as extensive as your business strategy? Or is it just one line? Come. Who you guys are all business, you all have customer strategies. Come. Who else has a customer strategy? Come. Again, why not? Yeah. So what's the difference between a customer strategy and a business strategy?
Okay. I'm getting paid for this evening. It's your birthday, remember? Yeah. Yeah, actually there is no difference in a B2C type of environment. Everything that a business does directly or indirectly affects the customer. So, one of the things that we imbibe as an organization, coming right down from the managing director itself, is that no company can operate in an environment without social sanction. And society is made up of people, and the people are your customers. So, everything that you do in a business is a customer strategy in some way or the other.
I agree with what he's saying. The customer strategy is highly ingrained into the business strategy. And that's where the critical focus is all about. So fundamentally, when we create our business strategy, it is keeping in mind who are the customers, who are the stakeholders, right from the employees, right from the customers, right from the end consumer, and the influencers. Everybody in the chain needs to, we need to create a value for them.
Swati, you've got a look of you don't believe all this. You believe all this?
Okay, we believe that customer strategy, we have a department called customer strategy, but the purpose is only to be just slightly ahead of business, because what happens very often is that operations particularly, they tend to be very inward focused and not external focused, because any organization given a choice would rather have inward focus and focus on efficiency, because that's the most profitable area for an organization. So in our case, customer strategy just runs a little ahead and says this is how your customer is changing, so if you don't change, there is a danger ahead, that's all.
I have the benefit of being the last, and I would probably agree. For us, customer and business strategy is completely interwoven. Almost, I would say, indistinguishable from each other. Staying ahead of the game, anticipating what the environment is going to be is a very key thing, because you have to innovate, and a repeat rate of a customer is very important for us. So it's kind of interwoven.
Okay, so again, I'm different from everyone, right? Everyone says, what the hell is the difference between customer strategy and business strategy? In a business strategy, we look at the marketplace. And therefore, we look at customers. So what the hell are you talking about? What am I talking about? the customer strategy is different from the business strategy. Many, many years, I did business strategy for many, many companies. I was the strategy advisor to the KK Birla group and this group and that group. And it took me years to discover that I was doing something wrong. That the first thing that you have to do is to have a customer strategy and a shareholder strategy. And that has to drive your business strategy. So what's the difference between a customer strategy and a business strategy? The best example that I can give you is the meltdown. We're all suffering from the meltdown that happened in America, the mortgage meltdown. So what was happening? Here's a customer who needs a mortgage. If you had a customer strategy, what would you look at?
No, can he pay it back?
Can he pay it back? So you would be looking for products that you could sell to him that would allow him to pay back or not become insolvent when the interest rates went up or the prices of homes went down. Right? And that's what you as a mortgage provider would be doing. And what was the market strategy? No? Market strategy was that if I can bundle mortgages and sell them, I can make more money. What does that mean? So I give this guy 100 rupees of mortgage for 30 years. My 100 rupees has gone. Then I find this fellow, and he says, I will buy these mortgages from you. So I take 50 of these mortgages. So I've got 5,000 rupees worth of mortgages, which would have given me 5% per year. Right? He says, I'll buy them off you. I'll give you 2%. So I get my 5,000 rupees back. I get 2%. Right? So I got 40% of what I would have got. But I can now lend that 5,000 rupees to someone else. So the name of the game for me from the marketing strategy was, let me bundle mortgages. And this guy bundled it and went to the next guy and so on and so forth. And then what happened was everyone took their eyes off the customer. They're all looking at the market opportunity. So what does Charles Schwab say? You know who Charles Schwab is, right? The guy who started this low-cost brokerage. Charles Schwab said, we forgot we were handling the customer's money. Who cares about the customer? Because our business strategy says do this. So therefore, you folks have to start looking at the customer strategy first. What is the customer really wanting? And how do I do it? And which departments are going to do this? So if I say the customer is job one, that means every department has to say that. And if every department doesn't say it, then all you've got is a bullshit statement. And that's why it doesn't work. Because you have bullshit statements written in the mission statements and all of that. No one really believes them. So you've got to do a full-blown customer strategy before you can do a business strategy. And if you can get that message across in your company, you would make your company a better customer-centric company. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Okay, so what's next? So I want to talk about customer value management because that's my field. So, and I heard the word value being thrown around. What is value? What is value? No one? Hey, everyone is talking about value. You heard the word value, it didn't matter to you what it meant? What is value? Come on, I'll have to force someone to give me an answer, not you. What is value?
It's the worth of what probably the customer ends up paying, and is it worth what he is spending? Is it worth the pain? It's worth the...
what is value?
Value for me would be something extra, something that you bring onto the table.
What is value?
Something that will make me happy.
Something that will make you happy. Okay. What's value?
It's the point where expectations meet delivery, and where we are.
What's value?
I think it's about if I spend a time, effort, or money, whether as a customer or as an individual, what do I get out of?
Get more, spend less.
Okay. So I think most of you got this right. Value is you pay something and you get something, and if you get more than what you pay for or what something is worth, then it's value. And one of you said time and energy. Value is not just what you pay for it. Now, most places I go to, when I say value, someone says, aha, value for money. What is value for money? What's value for money? Come on, you guys are in this business. You're customer services guys. Huh? Value for money. Come on, in that corner, young lady there. What's value for money? Yeah, it's okay. But value for money really means that you're price conscious. I got value for money. I got more than what I paid for, but I got value for money. And what is money for value? Anyone heard money for value? You buy a Videocon TV, it's value for money. And you buy a Sony, it's money for value. So if someone keeps, the problem with most people is they say that the only thing that drives customers is price. Right? Have you heard that? And if the only thing that drives customers is price, what does that tell you about the product? It's a commodity product. There is nothing else that you can add or say about the product that will sell the product other than price. Right? So the moment you start saying consumers only care about price, that means you're selling a commodity product. And one of the things that India has been good at, believe it or not, is to decommoditize products. Cement companies, fertilizer companies, they're selling the most commodity product. But they've been able to decommoditize the product by doing branding, by doing all kinds of exercises. When you go to the West, they say, what's wrong with these Indian companies? We're selling a commodity, we'll only sell on price. Cement sells on price. Here we're able to say, oh, Ultratech cement, something special. So you can decommoditize products. I didn't mean to talk about it, but and what is customer value added? Customer value added is a relative term. It's the perceived worth of your offer divided by the perceived worth of your competitive offer. And you notice we're not talking about satisfaction. What is satisfaction generally about? What does satisfaction measure? Matching expectations. But it generally measures transactions. Was the coffee good? Was your seat good? Was the speaker good? It's here and now. Value is something that remains in your mind. So you have the dabbawalas here, and they talk about this is my price. I've never heard in all these years anyone talk about the price that the dabbawalas take. They only talk about the service. Right? And the reason for that is that they're getting some value out of it. They're not looking at the satisfaction that this thing arrives every day on time, but there's a much bigger side. The things he talked about, the relationship probably that the Dabbawala creates with both sides, the added value of the services that they add and things of that sort. So people buy based on the value that you create, not on the satisfaction. And the value that you create is an embedded feeling that customers have. And you've got to measure that embedded feeling versus measuring just mere satisfaction. And it's always competitive. You cannot measure yourself against yourself. You have to measure yourself against competition. And if you're not doing that, you're not measuring satisfaction or value right. Okay? So, I've made a case for customer value added, which none of you use, right? None of you use customer value added? So, I need 3 people with me. Can someone from this table come and join me? Will you come and join me? Someone from this table, will you come and join me? And will you come and join me? Do you measure satisfaction? What company are you with?
I'm Rina Rebello. I work with Mahindra Life Spaces. We are the infrastructure division from Mahindra's.
So do you measure satisfaction?
Yes, we have internal as well as CAP score, customer as promoters. So this is an exercise done at the MLDL level, that's our company level, as well as the Mahindra and Mahindra level.
Do you measure competition?
We do. In the customer satisfaction index, we have the parameters done internally as well as we benchmark with competition. Yes, we do, Gautam.
No, benchmark, but do you actually measure what that your competition is doing?
Yes, we do.
Same questions are asked?
Same questions are asked.
Yes. Customers of the... Very
yes.
Good, very good. Okay.
Hello, my name is Prashant. I'm from Solrand, Bangalore. Yeah, we do satisfaction survey. We have a customer care center here at Bangalore. And for every transaction, we do a satisfaction survey. Yep.
And do you do it versus your competition like Atlas?
Yeah, as she rightly pointed out, yeah, we have some benchmarks which we measure.
But are your competition's customers asked the same questions that your customers are asked?
Yeah.
So if you measure 100 customers of your own,
right.
Do you measure 100 of Atlases? You do the same?
It may not have the same numbers, but we definitely have the same questions asked.
I'm Dipankar. I represent a company called Oryx Auto Infrastructure. We are in the auto segment on the services side.
So, do you measure satisfaction?
No, we really don't measure satisfaction. What we generally do is find out what our competition is doing, what we are doing, and find out what is it that would suit our customer better.
So how did this customer value thing start, right? In the 80s, AT&T was a leader in the telephone space. And one day, they got 95% satisfaction rating. So they patted each other on the back, and they gave each other raises, and they said, "Attaboy, what a great job." 3 months later, they discovered that they had lost 3 points of market share, $5 billion in revenues, and the board asked, "What happened? You got 95% satisfaction." And that's when they discovered that your own score didn't matter because the competition was getting more than 95%, and they weren't measuring that. The second thing they found was that people are more interested, actually all of us are more interested in the value of the products that we get. So if for example, this young man bought a shirt, he just didn't go and pick up that shirt. Assuming you knew which shop to go to, you looked at 5 or 6 shirts and you asked what the price was, and you might have picked the one that was the most expensive or the cheapest or whatever it was, but you had something in your mind, I'm going to wear this shirt to work, and maybe it should wash properly, and maybe it should iron properly, or whatever it is. And then you look at the price, and you sort of balance them, and you did this. This is computation in your mind. And with that, you decided which one to buy. You bought the thing with the most amount of value. And therefore, we need to measure that, what made you buy that versus what made you satisfied. Because when you bought it, where was your satisfaction index? You never had that shirt, so how did you know you're going to be satisfied? Right? So therefore, satisfaction is after the fact. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, what's next? All right. So a lot of people have talked about attitudes versus processes. And I think this is something that people are going to talk about tomorrow. So who believes that processes are really very important? Okay, 2, 3, 4, but half the audience. How many believe that attitude is important? Bigger. And whose attitude is important? The person who's going to come, join us. The person who's going to follow the process is all right. Who else? Come. No, the person next to you. Yeah, go ahead. You can. What? Okay. Come. Why don't you join us? Who else is going to join us? Will someone from this table join me? Come. This is your opportunity to talk. Tomorrow again you'll have to hear. So today you can talk as much as you want. So what's more important, attitude or process?
I think it's important to have people with the right attitude at every level. And they should be aware of the processes that through which they have to service or to give value to the customer.
So here's an attitude guy. Okay.
I follow the same funda. It's about attitude. Process may not work because there is no perfect world, like mentioned earlier in the day. But the attitude is something that drives you through the competition, through difficult time, through difficult customers, and I'm sure that's the way up.
Okay, so you're also an attitude guy.
Any process cannot be successful without a person who is having right attitude.
No, but if he follows the
process alone,
then he's got the right attitude.
No, you should have right attitude to follow the process.
So
what will happen if we are not having right attitude? Once it will become a ritual. It's a systematic thing which I have to follow. That should not be there. The idea of following the process you should understand. Try to capture the correct thing from the customers, for which you should have right attitude. Otherwise, we cannot do it.
So, are you for attitude?
Attitude.
I got him up here because he was the process. He changed his mind. Turncoat.
No, I said attitude.
Okay, yeah. That's a good one. A thought process for the right attitude. Come, I need someone who's on the process side. Come on. Someone's got to believe in processes. No one believes in processes? Are you guys tired? So how do we start to get a good attitude? Yeah, one is that one of the biggest problems I think we have in India is no one wants to follow the rules. I mean, I can't find anyone who wants to follow the rules, go from A to B to C to D. They want to go from A to N, from N to X, and things of that sort. Have you ever tried to give directions to someone? You say, मेरा घर वो पेट्रोल पंप के बाजू में है और मेरे 2 telephone number है. Fellow will only take down 1 number and he'll never note down that it's next to the petrol pump. So he loses his way. Worse still, he has to send some customer services guy out. Domino's has that problem, right? The guy hasn't taken the address properly and the poor guy is going around in circles because the person in this flat, he's on the 10th floor. Never gave him 10th floor. And the poor guy is looking for it. So one of the problems is this business of following the rules and getting things right. And the second thing that we find in all of this is not only that people don't want to take directions properly, people don't believe in being nice to each other. No one comes into the office and smiles at you and says, good morning, how are you, shakes your hand. No one does that. You take your workplace and the people in the workplace for granted. And till you can set a kind of an internal ambience, an internal system of being good to each other and smiling at each other, you can't do this outside. So the courtesy system has to start inside your company. And if you don't build a courtesy system, you'll never build a good attitude. And once you build a courtesy system, you'll find that people talk to each other, you'll find that people communicate with each other, you'll find that a whole bunch of things start to improve. So that's all part of attitude. But we don't believe that's important because I truly believe that most Indian companies believe that processes are kings. The process is not to be tampered with. It's what's the right word? Sacrosanct. So that's what we have. So let's just ask this question. If you had processes and no attitude, what would happen?
It would just be a ritual. There will be no ownership of either service and how you handle customer. And as you rightly said, how we interact with each other even. We would not probably collaborate. I know my process is this. Say I am in logistics, my process is this. He's in marketing, his process is this.
If there is only process, no attitude, I think you'll become a machine because you'll keep on giving photocopies of the same paper that has been put in the machine. So
you'll become machines, he says.
We'll be missing personal touch. Process will be there, but if there is no attitude, definitely we'll be missing personal touch. The desired results will not be there.
And if you had a great attitude and no processes?
There is no direction. I am having very good attitude to work, but I don't know what to do. Process is very, very important, but attitude is more important to follow the process.
So you keep coming back to follow the process. And then when I question you say, no, attitude.
I think good.
I said attitude only in the beginning. Who has to have attitude? The person who is going to follow the process should have attitude.
Okay.
Once you find the people and you make the right attitude with them, I'm sure process has to be in place. But then I'll mention clearly, attitude is superficial. It's about getting into priority for right. So.
Normally, if we have a great attitude, we will try to arrive at the process for giving the whatever, whether it is on behalf of the company or as an individual, you will try to give the person you are interacting with the right experience.
So, since we have a few minutes, let me just ask: How do you guys can rest? How do you get good attitudes? The options are training. What are the other options? Hiring, training. contagious. Uniform ideology. What did you say?
Culture. It's an impact of the right culture.
Huh?
Experience.
Motivation.
What else?
Remuneration.
Create role models. Anyone else?
Sir, I will tell you, when I started the career as a stores in charge, there was no certification. When ISO started, the process came and my attitude changed because the process demanded that.
So we've heard process, we've heard training, we've heard added experience, hiring.
Shared vision.
Shared vision. So what really is needed to make the attitude happen in a company? Someone said culture. Who said culture? Culture. So how do you I guess it all will eventually boil down to how you can change the culture, right? Right? So and how do you change the culture? Reward, yeah. How do you change the culture? Communicate. By doing it yourself. Making each team member inclusive. Bettering performance. Yeah. What else? So, my belief is that the culture really starts with the top man. And the top man doesn't really believe in customers, and he believes that it isn't his role to talk to a customer. If he doesn't spend at least a day in the week talking to customers, you ain't going to get no culture. All of you. I tell customer services people that I feel sorry for you. They all look at me and say, why do you feel sorry for us? Because you are really trying to swim upstream. You're trying to do something which the rest of the company is not really supporting you in. What they're saying is, I've got this customer services department, so-and-so is king of customer services, and I've taken care of the customer. So how is this attitude going to change? It has to change from the top. And how do you change the attitude at the bottom? Most people say it's by training. Right? I say it's not going to be by training. It's going to be by self-learning and self-education. If you ask your driver, if you ask him, he'll never give you an answer, but if a friend of yours asks the driver, what should you do or what shouldn't you do, he'll tell you all the right things. But yet he does all the wrong things. Because it's not coming from within the heart. Your driver cannot understand what it is to own a car. Why you are fussy about things. He can't understand all these things. So, your person who goes to deliver a pizza arrives half an hour late, he can't understand why is this guy in such a big rush. You know, I don't get to eat at the right time. So the first thing that you have to do is to build the self-esteem of these people. People like the people in the front line in India have a very tough situation. And unlike the West. In the West, your driver has a car. In the West, the person who comes and cleans your house lives in a nice apartment. Not in the greatest apartment, but in a nice apartment. Here, the person who comes to clean your house probably lives in a place where dust is all over the place. And you come and say, "Yahan par bhai, theek se saaf nahi kiya." Person can't even see it. Can't even see it. And we're going to educate them. We're going to train them. You have to make first build their self-esteem, make them feel good about themselves. This is what I think you guys do for your Dabbawalas. You have to make them aware. Once they have the self-esteem, they'll become aware. And once they become aware, they will start to become proactive. And then when you put them together and say, what are we going to do? They will come up with the things they ought to do. They don't need to be told. Our whole life we're being told. We grow up, mother says, drink your milk, eat spinach, do this, do that. Then you grow older, teacher says, stand up, say good morning, teacher, or I'll put you in the corner, and then you go to work and the boss says, today you will go and meet these 5 people. Maybe I could have seen 6 people, but I ain't going to do that because I've been told to do 5. Right? So how do you build this process of proactiveness? And that's what we want to do. I'm sorry I heard the word empowerment today. It drives me nuts. You have to enable people. You can empower them, but you don't enable them. What good is the empowerment? Just say, I've given you the power, but I'm not giving you the tools. So we have to do a lot of things that are different. And that's how the attitude changes. Attitude changes from within, not by training, not by forcing people to do it. Okay, any questions on any of these things? Anyone has any thoughts? I know this is the end of the day, and she looks like she's had it. I don't blame you. So I'm going to end, and I'll just throw some books that I've written that might be worth your while to look at. But there's a lot to be done, and you've got to go beyond your current thinking. And only when you do that, when you go to next practices, will you be able to go beyond competition. Thank you very much.